Hey everyone, quick programming note. We ended up having to end this recording session suddenly. Everyone is fine! Don't worry! But that's why the ending of the podcast might seem a little abrupt. And also, our hit new segments, Playdate with Matt and Ranking Every Adventure Game Ever, will return next week. Okay, bye.
Have you ever looked at the bottom of your toes?
Oh,
Sorry,
no.
I sit cross-legged and I'm just
Okay.
staring at the bottom of my toes and they're weird.
They're just
Honestly,
toes.
all the time, because I also sit like that.
Why can
Can
I
you
only
describe
see
what's weird?
There's a tendon or a muscle or something that I can only see on one toe. And surely there must be muscles and tendons on all of them, but I can only see it on one.
Maybe you have an extra one.
Ah,
Yeah, you
That's the
freak.
weird thing about toes, is they're just sacks of jelly, but there's one tendon that pulls so tight it moves them around.
it's creepy.
What?
What I like so much about the bottom of toes is the little like balls of the toes, that there's like a little shelf there. Like if you're hanging your feet down, it's like straight down, you have a little shelf you could maybe like keep some tiny bottles on or something.
And then
You speak like you've done this before, Matt. And it's a little strange.
I don't have bottles that small, but I've thought
Yeah.
about buying some just to keep on my hanging toes.
Oh, what are those? What are those you have there? Oh, those are my toe bottles.
Just in case.
I started an OnlyFans just for my toe bottles. I just dangle them down, put the bottles on, and people pay me $700 a month.
Yeah, don't laugh, Roses. This is how your podcast is funded.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Save Your Game. I am your host, Matt Allcamp. And with me, as always, are all these spiders that are crawling over my desk. Why is my desk full of spiders?
Oh, I put them there. I thought you could use some
Oh.
friends.
Yeah, I mean, there's better ways to make friends, I'm
But
sure.
I summoned them just for you.
Okay, I want to say I appreciate it, but I don't. I don't know why. Yeah, just as that intro was playing, as the intro music was playing, I just noticed like 3 spiders on my desk, and now I'm fucking freaked.
I'm so
it's
glad you got them.
it's Pushing Up Roses, everybody.
Hi, it's me, pushing up roses.
How you doing, Roses?
I talk to spiders. I'm hanging in there. How are you, besides the spider situation?
I'm just thinking about these spiders, to be honest. You know what, actually,
Did they leave already, or are they still there?
I blew one. Well, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to
I used the air from my lungs
Thank you.
to propel one that was making a line between my work computer and my home computer.
That's nice.
By line, I mean web. There's words for these. Anyway, I'm excited, actually, Roses.
Please tell me why.
Because on this episode, we have 2 very special guests. They are talented and smart and funny and
Is it
charming
us?
as hell.
Is it me and you?
Matt Allcamp and Pushing Up No, it is the 2 hosts of the podcast Escape This Podcast. We have Bill and Danny. Now, Bill and Danny, do you guys use your should I say full names or just Bill and Danny?
Okay, so for years on our show, we were just Bill and Danny, and we
Right.
didn't.
We didn't even
know-
introduce
in fact,
ourselves.
No, for I think the first year of our show, we never even said our first names because, and everyone was like, "Who's hosting this show?" Then we had years of we never really said our surnames, not out of any desire to be secretive, but just because it just didn't come up.
Yeah.
And then people we got a lot of fan mail being like, "Hey, are you 2 siblings? Are you 2
Oh no!
friends?
Oh
Are you married? What's going on?"
Yeah.
And to this day, nobody knows.
But anyway, the real reason that we're here is that all Australians are spider experts, so we can help deal with this.
Yeah.
All right. Now, these spiders are very tiny. Do you guys still know about these?
Yeah, no, look, it really looks like you've got a bit of a Cinderella situation on your hands. Those 3 spiders are going around and trying to make everything nice and lovely for you while singing a little song.
Okay. And I'm just abusing them. I'm just like, get the fuck out of here.
I did
You're
send
really
very
unappreciative.
polite spiders. I mean, you're acting, Matt, as though I sent you goblins or something. I sent you polite cleaning spiders.
They're good
Okay, now
spiders.
I gusted this one away. I'm trying to find other words because I got literally red after I said the thing that I said. But so I gusted this one away. But I swear it was like it had like a pink body and green legs. Is that possible?
That's
Ooh.
not anything.
I
What?
do like that.
It's like a 1970s punk rock spider.
I am so sorry to bring this up and to say these words on a recorded podcast, especially for people who listen to our shows, and we don't really swear in our shows. But it is odd, right? Because there is a phrase in Australia, which is, we're not here to fuck spiders.
Excuse me?
It just means we're not going to mess about. Let's get down to business. We're not here to fuck spiders. So there is something there.
There is something about Australia, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know how to finish. Like, I don't know how to continue that thought, but there is something about Australia that you're the only country who would say something like, we're not here to fuck spiders, as your way of saying, I'm not going to mess about.
I'm going to use that all the time now, so thank you so much for that.
But in America, if you say that to somebody like at the bar, you wouldn't say it at the bar, because at the bar you are there to fuck spiders, I guess, right? Like you are.
Oh yeah,
fuck around.
that's what you do.
You know that scene in a horror movie where someone is going about their business and then a drop of blood drips on them, and then a second one, and then suddenly a whole bunch more. I have had that happen to me with baby spiders.
Oh my
that's
God!
Oh no, he's gonna blow.
I'm gonna fall out of my chair. That is. Whew.
Matt is a little squeamish. He doesn't appreciate, quote, gross things.
That
I will say I am at my most Australian when I see there's a species of spider in Australia called a huntsman spider. It's just a big old spider, and it lives in your house, and it eats bugs, and it doesn't create webs. And generally, the advice is leave them alone. They're fine. They're better to be in your house than not. But the moment you see one, when it's not supposed to be, it's just like, mate, hey, come on. Mate, what are you doing here? Can you get...
Really
this is an actual interaction I've had with a spider on my kitchen floor.
I
walked in,
them.
It stood in the middle of my kitchen with its little front legs raised, like, what are you going to do about it? And I went, hey, this is not part of the deal.
But you're the country that sometimes have spiders that are like the size of the wall of your house.
Yeah. Sometimes I've once moved into a house and I thought it had an extra bedroom. It was more living room. There was just a spider standing there, looking like a wall.
And it's like, oh, sorry guys, sorry.
Should we take a second to tell people what our podcast is?
Please tell us about. Yeah.
Let's put the finishing touches on the introduction.
Yeah. Do you guys? I mean, I could sing its praises voluminously, but do you guys want to say just like basic premise?
Yeah, I can give a small rundown. So we have 2 shows really. We have our major show our first show is called Escape This Podcast, where we design audio escape rooms. So it's a full escape room experience, but it's played in audio, sort of like a D&D game or like playing through a text-based adventure. And we have guests come on and they play through the room, they solve all the puzzles, they get through the story. And
as you two well know.
You two have been guests on a recent episode.
No way.
I have no memory of what the room was.
Circus.
Oh, it was a
circus. Yeah.
It was a fun circus. And so you know what it's like to play. We have a second show called Solve This Murder, where we do a similar sort of vibe, but for murder mysteries. We design a sort of Agatha Christie style detective murder mystery, and then the other player has to be the detective and solve it. And it's a lot harder because in the escape room, it's like there are clues and puzzles and you solve them. Whereas the murder mystery is, here's a dead body, go. What? Go.
I love that.
Who do I ask? I don't know. You're the detective. Oh.
Yeah.
Imagine
that's
being
incredible.
a detective on the scene and being like, who do I ask about this?
Surely
that's
there's an
like-
adult here.
That's like escape this podcast hard mode. It sounds
Oh
like.
yeah.
It's great fun, though. We've had a bunch of fun murder mysteries. We swap off who writes them and hosts them.
And we don't bring on guests for that one because it is too hard and I wouldn't know how to deal with it with another person as well. I have to pause every half hour to just like breathe and cry a little bit.
It is
no!
one of, we have occasionally had mysteries where we never spoke to the murderer. We solved the whole thing and we never
Wow.
wanted. It was like I had one where it was like on my list of interviewees, it was like, well, the 7th person on my list will be this guy. And I did the first 6 and went, wait a minute. I don't want to talk to that 7th guy anymore.
Because he
I don't trust him.
Me. Yeah. Escape this. I've not listened to Solve This Murder, but I will. I will be during work tomorrow. But Escape This Podcast is just great fun. Listeners, you might be thinking, well, how does it feel to listen to an escape room? Like that doesn't. I don't know that I would be able to follow. You can. They do it really well. These two have a really great sense of building a scene and a world. It's like listening to an actual play D&D podcast.
Yeah. That was what we were hoping when we started it. Like initially, of course, we weren't sure if it was going to work and just a little bit of playing around and went, oh my God, how has nobody done this before? It totally works.
It absolutely works. And that's how I feel about it. I feel like it is... it should be mentioned. Anybody who's going to talk about some of these top tier, anyone who's going to talk about the Adventure Zone or what's Critical Role should be talking about Escape This Podcast in the same breath. It's
hold on. Let's just clip that audio, and we're going to put that in our ads.
And in fact, you guys have had the McElroys on.
Yeah,
we've had we haven't had Critical Role people. We've had Critical Role adjacent people. We had Abria Iyengar on the show.
Oh, that's amazing.
And yeah, various people in that field. But yeah, the McElroys have been on a few times. Yeah, we've had a bunch of fun guests and silly guests, and
they have definitely had a lot of crossover with the D&D audio space. And
I'm gonna say something kind of controversial here. I don't really like listening to D&D games. I would rather listen to things that you do. I think I don't care about the combat really. Like even when I used to real-time roleplay on AOL, like in the chat rooms.
Sure.
And the chat room did have a dice mechanic, but the ones we played, it was all just real-time writing and RPG. And that's kind of what I live for, is roleplay that doesn't have combat in it. So the few times I did play D&D, I just wanted to like talk to as you guys noticed from our episode, I just want to talk to everybody and like, look at stuff.
No, yeah, we definitely have lots of things that we could say about combat in RPGs and things like that, and how to balance them out, and balancing the mechanics with story when you're turning it into a podcast, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I do think D&D is a good. This is way off topic for our show, but I think D&D is a good. I think there's a reason all these actual play podcasts have taken off. It is a podcast that got me to listen to D&D. I was like a young comedian, right? And I was looking. Basically, I was like working a boring desk job, and I was like, I'm gonna find something dumb to listen to during work, and it maybe has the dumbness of it will just inspire me. Comedically, right? Like that was literally my thought. And I found this podcast called Drunks and Dragons that was just some people playing Dungeons and Dragons. You guys know that show?
I'm sure it's on my list of playlists of ones that I've listened to at least some of the episodes of.
Sure.
I got so fucking hooked. Like I loved that show, and I listened I listened to the first 4 episodes and was laughing to myself. But by the 5th episode, I was like, "Oh my God, what's gonna happen?" And then I fell in love with that show, and I listened to the first. I don't know. I think they're on 300 episodes. I think I stopped listening around 150 or something. Not because it was bad, just because life changed.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But it got me into D&D, and then I ended up hosting a live comedy Dungeons and Dragons show because I was that into Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, nice.
But I don't know why I went off on that tangent. Just we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons stuff. How about video games? Have you guys been playing anything?
Oh, right.
Yeah, Bill and Danny, have you guys been playing anything interesting lately?
We've been doing a lot of replaying because we recently bought Shadow of the Erdtree, and it's called Burning Shores, right? The DLCs for Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West. So it's been, okay, let's do a reset and play through every aspect of the original games again so that we can get to those bits.
Yes.
That's been taking a bit of the time.
Those are two games that are very difficult mechanics, so like you can't just jump into the DLC.
There's a lot of like, I gotta roll again. Okay, but that's not much of like these are not really adventure games sort of things in the same way. Like I've been playing Crusader Kings 3, not quite an adventure game. There's a lot of me bothering Dani and being like, Dani, I think I just found the bear that killed my father 15 years ago. He's making a fool of me. Not quite the same as adventure, but
that's true. At one point, it was just in the middle of doing absolutely nothing. I just hear, "Oh, my mother died."
Oh my god!
No, it was fine. That like my mother died. That was sad. Then I died, and then my new character came over, and he found out that his mother was the worst human being the world has ever seen. Not only did I find out that I was an illegitimate child because she had been cheating on my father the entire time. Then she just started murdering people at court for no reason. And I had to solve this murder. And I found a note from my mother saying, "It was me, you fool." And then she fled to France. And I didn't know what to do about it.
But you were the father.
I was the father. Then he died and I became my own son. It was
twice as bad. It's twice as bad to
she
learn
was a
that
bad
about
wife.
Yeah.
And then she was a bad mother. And then she was a murderer. But that's not quite the same.
Before that, so we both not too long ago played through all of Tunic, and then I started doing a comparison run by playing Death's Door.
Yes, that was great.
Which
fun.
I feel like fit a little bit more into the theme.
Right. I've not played. Tell me about Death's Door. I've played Tunic.
Death's Door is in some ways similar. It's isometric, anthropomorphic animal, though barely anthropomorphic. You play a crow, and he is very crow-like. And it does involve going through different areas and fighting bad guys, fighting bosses in the same sort of way that Tunic does. It is less puzzly. There are still little hints of puzzle around, but it's far less focused on that, and it's more focused on the cutesy but a little bit grimmer than Tunic, Dark Souls-esque fighting.
Yeah.
It is cute.
It is.
I'm looking at screenshots, and I'm typically and historically, I have not liked isometric top-down. There's something about it that I don't know what it is. I must have had a traumatizing experience with an isometric adventure game. The only one I really like is Sanitarium, and nobody likes that game except me.
Well, an isometric game cheated on your father and began murdering people at court.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? I repressed it, but now that you've said it,
yeah. Death's Door is definitely a bit more unforgiving than Tunic, and I think more rewarded by Tunic because I always feel rewarded by puzzles, and I love language-based things as well.
I'm looking at Death's Door screenshots as well, and some of these could just be screenshots from Tunic with a different character placed in.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, superficially, a lot of similarities, but it seems like when you go online and look for people's preferences, different people will prefer a different one, but everyone has a very clear preference for one over the other, just depending on what they value in a game.
I loved Tunic. I thought Tunic was just an incredible game.
Yeah, Tunic was a lot of fun. And Tunic was also nice in terms of like, there was a lot of puzzle stuff to do that got quite intensely puzzly, but if you didn't want to do the intensely puzzly stuff, you could just not engage with it.
Right.
It's sort of like right as it comes to the end, having this feeling of like, hey, do you like puzzles? If not, just go and stab someone. But if you love them, come over here to the puzzle corner of the game.
The puzzles were intense. The puzzles were like Animal Well level intensity. I haven't
played Animal Well yet.
No, so we have this growing list. Like for example, we have played through, and we'll probably talk about this later in the episode. We've played through every single Nancy Drew game, and there's a new Nancy Drew that's come out, and we've been putting it off because we figured we'll probably live stream it. So in terms of like playing more puzzly adventure game style things, we haven't been doing a huge amount. And I think part of that is because the other video game thing that we've been doing lately, which again, we'll probably have some time to talk about later, is we've been writing and designing for the sequel to Case of the Golden Idol. We've been writing Rise of the Golden Idol and working on that. And so sometimes sitting down to play a different adventure game at the moment is like, no, it just makes me think about all the work I have to do. I have to go back and I have to finish this scenario. So maybe that's also partly.
It doesn't make me feel like that, but it does make me feel like, oh man, these people are so good at their puzzles.
Look at these cool puzzles.
Well, that's maybe we should talk about that now, because I was trying to think of a time that we would bring, like when we would discuss this, but fuck it. So you guys, you both were hired to write on. You were not part of the Case of the Golden Idol team.
No
Correct.
connection to the original.
Which means we can talk about how great that game is all day, and it's not weird.
No,
that game's cool.
Were you fans of that game before you got hired to write on Rise of the Golden Idol?
So the story of how we got into this is a friend of ours was a big fan of the first game, and he was on their Discord, and he noticed that they were putting out a call for writing staff for the sequel because they had a quicker turnaround and they wanted to expand their team and get new voices onto the writing team.
Right.
And he sent us a screenshot of like a Discord post, said, hey, you should apply for this. And all we knew at the time was, oh, people have been telling us to play Case of the Golden Idol. It's been mentioned as a thing that we should play, but we hadn't engaged with it at all. It was on our list of many, many things. You know, we had just finished playing, like I think I had just finished playing Outer Wilds based on a recommendation and been like, oh my God, this game blew my mind. And I was like, okay, the same person had recommended I play Case of the Golden Idol, so we'll do that next. But we hadn't. And so they sent us this thing that said they're looking for people to hire. We went, well, I don't want to just apply for this because maybe the game's bad. Maybe I'll play it and be like, this is a dumb game and I don't like it. So we sat together and we played through the original game and
probably 24 hours or so.
Yeah, we just sort of sat and just played and immediately just fell in love. It's such a cool game.
It's so good. It's so tight. It's so like all the information is relevant. The only answers can be the answers, right? Like me and Roses often use that as our reference point when we're talking about mystery games. Is sometimes a lot of mystery games involve guessing. And Case of the Golden Idol is a game where there is no guessing involved as long as you're paying attention. You do not need to guess at any solution.
I don't mind like guessing as long as I'm doing doing it with purpose. But like the game we had talked about last week, A Case of Mistrust, I was telling Matt about. It's a very cool, stylized murder mystery adventure game. But I noticed that in my evidence notebook, because you collect evidence in this notebook to be used later, everything I look at is now evidence. So I'm talking about now my lamp is in the evidence. So my evidence list is enormous, and I'm just guessing, and I'm like, is it the lamp? Is it the lamp in my office?
I've been thinking about that all week. I've been thinking about the idea of like everything that I look at in my house, just like,
it's evidence.
Clean up this dust on the floor. And it's like, now that adds to my evidence if I go somewhere completely different to solve a murder.
Yeah.
Man.
So we played through the first game. We absolutely loved it. We sort of fell in love with the style of it. And like I also like that it's such an easy thing to express, which is like it's a detective game that uses Mad Libs, right? It is the blank blanked the blank in the blank, then he blanked the blank. Like that's how you play the game. It's such an easy concept to get across. And so we played it. We applied straight away because we're like, that was amazing. I'd love to work on the sequel. And yeah, we did some interviews. We chatted. We talked about Escape This Podcast and Solve This Murder and all this stuff that we had done in that space. And we were brought on to the writing team. It's like a 7-person writing team, I think, for the new game.
Cool.
And it's one of those things where it was pitched as you will be writing for the game, but it's been a lot of like we've been writing, but we also, because of how the game is, right? It's these set scenes. It means we're also basically doing level design. We're saying where everything should go, what should be there, and how to, and then we're inputting everything into the engine, and then we're creating the puzzles in engine, and we're doing a lot of development. It's been a lot of,
right.
I mean, a lot for people. Anyone who's on the playtesting side of this will have seen huge amounts of my hand-drawn art, which looks horrendous for placeholders. Like, here's a little guy, and he's he's barely better than a stick figure. Like, I'm doing a crime, and it's like, well, who's that? So yeah, doing art, doing a whole bunch of stuff. So it's been really interesting, and it's just been a lot of fun
Now,
to be part of that team.
I played the Rise of the Golden Idol demo. It was incredible. It was so good. So it's not that far away, right? I don't.
No, it's coming out
Pretty
soon.
What news do you have for us in terms of release date?
Okay, so release date. I think I can give like a rough release date, though. I don't think anybody can hold me to it. But I'm pretty sure I checked at
when
least.
you Google it just to see how much information is out there. It says 2024.
Yeah,
and that's definitely true.
When it's the next day, I'm gonna be banging on your door. I'm gonna be like, "You said!"
Yeah, the next time you can complain, I think, is like early November. Is the rough time. Like, that's the ideal, unless of course at some point someone behind the scenes goes, "Oh, hey, we've discovered that everything's broken." Then who knows? But as of now, it's working pretty well. So I think everything should still be on track for the start of November.
Well, I've just emailed my boss asking for the entire month of November off. So you better be right, or I'm going to lose all my PTO for absolutely no reason. I'm just kidding. I don't have any PTO
no, it was
left.
Good. The demo is great. For people who want to check it out, you can play the demo now. It's on Steam. And yeah, it is a lot of fun. You can see that like the structure of it has changed a little bit in terms of how things solve, and I remember that was like early meetings when we sat down. Part of it was like, we're thinking of changing these things around or messing with this, or we'd like
just trying to experiment with how to make, like, what can we add while still obviously making sure that it feels like Golden Idol, because you don't want to change the spirit of what made the first one so great.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think it's done well at sort of achieving that goal. It's just been an odd experience. It's been an odd experience as well from a writing point of view of like, we'll just like pitch a person. We'll like be writing a scene and be like, and then there's this guy's in the scene and his name's something dumb like this, blah, 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 blah. And then like 4 months later, they're like, all right, so at this critical point where that guy with that stupid name does this incredibly important thing, you're like, what? How is this still in here?
How is it still there? Yeah.
Why are we all agreeing that this guy's a major character? He's a dummy I made up. Your art is still based on the hand-drawn thing that I did on an iPad. Like that's not all right. That's part of it. We're really making this.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, but do you guys know Ben and Dan from Size 5 Games? They did.
No.
They did Lair of the Clockwork God and the other Ben and Dan games. Well, regardless, they have a podcast where they talk about like the development process of their next game.
Sure.
And they brought everybody in. They're like, hey, we're just going to write the game on this podcast. And at some point, when we start developing it, we'll just stop doing this podcast probably. But one thing that they do, and I think it's really smart, is kind of like you're talking, they'll just throw out an idea and they'll say like, well, not this, but, right? They'll be like, not this, but a hippo breaks in and crushes the main character. And it's like, what they mean is something ridiculous happens that, impedes the main character in that moment. But they just kind of throw out like the first thought in their head. And I think that's just like a brilliant way to write. Just like, well, not this, but this, like this dumb character does this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like when I would do proper writing. Yeah, that's what we call it. Like when I was doing actual like long form narrative writing, and eventually you get stuck in a sentence and eventually you just have to say, well, I can't tell what word I want to go here, so I'm just going to write a different word, underline it and keep going. And that underline means do not use this.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. If you look at anything I've written, there's just like red so all over the thing. It is the worst writing you've ever seen. Roses, is there any game that you've been playing lately?
Yeah, slightly. I decided to pick up just randomly, possibly for my stream. I stream every now and then. I picked up Little Witch in the Woods, and I think I had the idea that it was gonna be like a Stardew Valley-esque game. but it's not actually. It's more in line.
It's Dark
I kept being
Souls.
reminded almost. What now?
It's just Dark Souls. You're a little witch
It's just Dark
killing
Souls.
monsters in the
Man,
woods.
it went hard.
I see what you mean from the look of it, of assuming it would be Stardew
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
It was on my wish
Yeah, if
list
you
for a
look
long
at
time
it-
for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually, I would actually compare it more to like the new like Link's Awakening or even Chrono Trigger. It has some elements of that. It is not really a Stardew Valley type game, but you are crafting potions. But it's not like you're not farming. There's no farming. There's no real like management like that. And what the other thing I found was it's very cute. And when I say cute, I mean it's a little too young for me. And now a few people in the stream said it was because it was Korean and it was translated in such a way that maybe it's not getting across the right tone. But that being said, you know, I'm trying to read it and I'm playing all these very young, like very excitable characters. And it's not that as adults that we cannot play those kind of characters. It's just usually we go kind of Calvin and Hobbes with it and we make them a little more mature, a little more relatable. I'm not really relating to this character. She's so young. So it feels ultimately a little too cute. But that being said, it's very charming. It is a very charming, witchy, cozy game that has amazing music that reminds me of Final Fantasy VIII. Possibly the worst Final Fantasy.
No.
but my favorite
Don't
Final
you let
Fantasy.
them say that about Final Fantasy VIII. About, you know,
I agree.
about our great friends Quistis and
Quistis, Squall. Squall
Quistis, and the guy whose name starts with a Z. That guy who likes to punch things.
Yeah, what was his? Yeah,
They
and,
may have complained when the fake
Cypher.
president turned into a monster on that train, but they were fools. That's a great fight.
I love that. I really love.
It's a great game.
Is that the one where you suplex a train?
No, that's 6.
Oh, okay,
6
sorry,
has
my
you
mistake.
suplexing a train.
Yeah,
8 does
it's
have you
really great.
fighting a big tank with a sword in the opening mission. I
Oh,
think.
okay.
I've not gotten to 8 yet. I've been playing the Final Fantasy. I made a declaration one time. I was like, I'm not gonna play any Final Fantasy games till I'm 40, and then I think I said 50. And when I'm 50, I'm gonna sit and play every Final Fantasy game in a row. And then like 3 weeks after I like wrote that tweet or whatever, I was like, I think I'm gonna play all the Final Fantasy games. And I stalled at 7, but I'm excited for 8.
Well, here's what you should do. You've stalled at 7. That's fine. You skip 8 and 9, and you play 10, the objectively best Final Fantasy game, and then you play 10 over and over again for the rest of your life.
Hard to
10
disagree.
is phenomenal.
It's pretty bad.
10 is so good. The characters are great, the story is great, and it's the only one that's actually turn-based, so you can actually strategize during the fights, as opposed to just hitting A because someone else's turn is coming up behind you. It's the greatest one.
You know what? It's all about triple triad, though, in Final Fantasy VIII. It's all about that mini card game.
That
I
is true.
do love a mini card game.
Hey, wait a second. No. Hold the hell. You're going to say that you want to play cards instead of Blitzball? You could play Blitzball for 40 hours and do nothing, but you can get to the Blitzball portion of the Final Fantasy X and then just never finish it and play Blitzball forever. And
in my
happy.
teens and 20s, I tried to play Final Fantasy X many times and I couldn't get past various stages of intro. I just was not interested until one day I saw Billy playing Blitzball and I was determined to play for long enough to get up to the Blitzball, and I love it so much. I don't care about the rest of the game.
You should, though, because it's the best Final Fantasy.
I made it practically to the end, but just for more Blitzball.
Final Fantasy X is the one where you start as like a weird, like a pop star looking guy in a big city, right?
Yeah, where he has one pant leg that goes down to the knee and the other one that goes down just below his hip and then turns into fishnets that go down to the knee. What could be better?
That means he's a drug
the
dealer,
voice
right?
acting in that game, you guys.
That means he's
I just
holding.
can't with that voice
That's
acting.
more than fair.
Yeah, I remember playing the intro to that. I had that for PlayStation, when it was 2. And I remember playing the intro and then stopping, and then one time later in my life playing the intro and then stopping.
That was me.
Talking about the voice acting, my brain still at any point has the lines, but 1,000 years into the future? No way! Going over and over again in my head. It's a great game and it's the best Final Fantasy. So sorry, everybody.
All right,
Let's
moving on.
cause some fights.
I have been playing Fields of Mistria. Speaking of Stardew Valley like games, and this game, guys, it fucking rules. Like, it is. I did not. So many games claim to be the new Stardew Valley, right? Like, that's just a way to sell games these days. And most of them absolutely fall short. But Fields of Mistria is incredible. I'm loving every second of it. It's still in early access, but it is very much like, okay, it's like Stardew Valley, but the developers also were big fans of Harvest Moon, played Stardew Valley, and thought, this doesn't quite nail it. And so they put a lot of thought into what would define, say, the best version of Harvest Moon. Now, there's some parts that aren't as good as Stardew Valley, and that might be owed in part to the fact that it's early access. Like, you can only get to 4 hearts with various villagers. You can only get to certain levels. You can only get to certain stages in the dungeons. And certain other things are missing. But, like, the coziness and the cleverness, the personality that exists in Stardew Valley is all there. The farming feels great. They've added features that that exist in other sort of farming games, like catching bugs and
nice.
Digging for artifacts, which kind of exists in Stardew Valley, but it's its own mechanic here rather than just being an extension of hoeing. You could also jump and swim, which seem like silly little things, but like make a huge difference. There's other just like little things, right? Like the shops never close. The
bane of Stardew Valley.
Exactly.
Closed on Wednesdays.
Exactly. Yeah. And closed at a certain time of night. No, the shops are just always open. You don't have to refill your watering can. And the leveling system is a little bit more robust. When you get to certain level markers, you can use this kind of currency that you find by just performing like any action in the world will get you this essence. And you use that essence to level up certain perks. And the perks are like legit. Like, they will be like, if you mine one rock, the rocks to the left and right of it, like 10% of the time will also explode.
Fun.
Or if you have a jump attack suddenly. You hit jump and attack, and you will do like a area of effect attack around you. So unlike the sort of invisible experience and leveling system of Stardew Valley, Fields of Mistria puts it right out front. And there's a bit more of a fantasy element to it. Like, you do get spells. And there is like a clearly evolving narrative about humans and dragons and their relation through time. So there's a little bit more of like a fantasy RPG element to it, but it does not interrupt the cozy farming sim in any way.
Cool.
And the cows are adorable.
Very important.
It's incredible. It's a really, really good game. I discovered it, me and my lady friend, on Friday. It is now Wednesday for us, Thursday for Bill and Danny. On Friday, me and my lady friend downloaded it. I have 22 hours in it already.
Nice. That's how it's done.
It has become my new Stardew. So Fields of Mistria, Mistria. I highly, highly recommend for any Stardew fans.
That's amazing. I'm so sorry that when you finally start playing Final Fantasy X, you'll never play any other video game again.
Oh my god.
And you won't be able to play Fields of Mistria. I'm really sorry. It sounds like a lot of fun that you'll be missing out on. Because you'll be busy saving Spira.
So that's that's what I've been playing. Is I've been spending like way too much. There's some other stuff I've been playing, but we'll talk about it on future episodes. There's some really good adventure games that have come out recently.
I guess I gotta play Fields of Mistria now because I do crave that Stardew Valley itch. Like, there's not a lot of things that scratch that for me. Even things like Harvest Moon don't work for me. So if you're saying that this is a pretty decent, if they like share the same DNA, then I will pick it up.
In a really, really significant way, and not in a way where you feel like, oh, this is just Stardew Valley again. You feel like you are engaging in a new world. I would be very surprised. I'm not saying you're definitely going to love it, but I'd be very surprised if you didn't.
Yeah. Would you say that it gives you a sense of nostalgia for Stardew Valley? I'm trying to segue here. Just go with it.
What if but I have to say no, and then, I ruin the whole transition.
Ruined it.
Look, just play Swanky Maximino, and we'll talk about nostalgia. Welcome back to Save Your Game. I'm Matt Allcamp. This is Pushing Up Roses.
Sup?
We've got Bill and Danny from Escape This Podcast here.
Sup?
Okay.
How is everyone's break?
I was good.
Yeah.
Played Final Fantasy X.
Matt always asks that, whether we take a break or not.
I had somebody tell me, we didn't do it one episode, and I had somebody tell me, like, oh, it takes away that, like, personal aspect of I really like when you guys say, how was your break? So now I do it every single episode, even if our break was just us talking over the music.
That's nice, though. I'm surprised that somebody clocked that level of detail in our podcast, but hey, that's great.
It brings intimacy into the show. It helps support everybody's parasocial connections with us.
I mean, if it helps this person also, I also sit here, I light candles, I get my water ready, I dim my lights, I have my cat next to me. Like, is that intimate enough?
I usually clear off my desk, except for I put so many drinks on it. I'll put alcohol here in case I want it. I'll put water here because I need it, and then oftentimes I will put a hot drink and maybe a juice in case I get in the mood for it. I just cover my fucking desk in drinks.
This is too many drinks.
It's a little bit much.
It's the worst. The worst is if I decide to if I'm I'm only gonna have a nip of something to drink, an alcohol, and then I'm but in case I want more, I'll just bring the bottle. That's the worst, because I'm not even thinking about it as I'm talking. I'm absolutely not drunk, right? And then I'll be talking, and then I'll just be like, oh, that was tasty. I'll just pour another little guy. And then I'll keep talking, and you don't quite realize, and by the end of the episode, I'm I'm fucking wasted. I really hope the listeners can't tell.
Oh, good Lord.
Oh, I don't drink, but I did make it through a family pack of Maltesers yesterday in much the same fashion.
Ooh, yeah. There's just a thing. You're recording, and you're just you take a vacation on the rest of your faculties. So you guys wanted to talk about what I think is an interesting topic. We talk a lot on this show about nostalgia and how sometimes adventure games can be so linked to that concept, right?
Absolutely.
My whole channel is about that. Is really about nostalgia and how we look back at it. And you can either lean really heavily into it and gush about it, or it can kind of I think Matt, you mentioned this earlier. This will go into our topic, but the lack of nostalgia is even more interesting to me. having no nostalgia and then trying to play something that it seems like everybody in the world has nostalgia for. And how we interpret that. As an example, I didn't grow up on The Princess Bride, and everybody loves that movie. Everybody, but I was just like, it's fine. It's a good movie. I liked it, and people were like, but why don't you love it though? I'm like, I don't know.
I had the same experience. I didn't watch The Princess Bride until I was in my early 20s.
Yeah,
And I was like, this is a good movie. But there's no part of me that's like that. I don't think about it all the time.
right.
I don't compare it to everything. I don't like references to it don't pop up in my brain like as often as people who grew up on it do. And yeah, I think the same thing happens with adventure games a lot because so many of these games were really popular in the early 90s. Or in the mid 90s, I guess. And that's where so
it was a
many
definite
of us
crest.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think early 90s was really the peak because you're coming off of all the graphic, the text parsers in the mid to late 80s, and then early 90s comes along. You've got your point and clicks, man. You've got King's Quest V and VI, Gabriel Knight. It was just and Laura Bow, Dagger of Amon-Ra. Yeah, it was a really good time for adventure games. And then Doom killed it all, according to some people.
And
Doom was my first video game when I was 3. I had older brothers.
Nice.
I think like so many people played those games in the 90s, and that's like the bulk of the fan base now. And it's hard because people talk about it as if it's a genre that died. But people have been making adventure games nonstop. And I think one of the things that holds the genre back, to be honest, is our like slavish devotion to nostalgia and people making games that are so many adventure games that are made these days are based around nostalgia. And I have much more of a fondness for the ones that break through that and do something new.
I have a question that anybody can answer. Because we have so many adventure games, because we've gone through so many art designs, right? We have pixel inspired design, we have 2D cartoonish design, we have FMV and live acted. How is there a way to make a game that doesn't give you nostalgia even on a base level for another game? Because most books have been written, let's be honest. It's not that we can't come up with something new, but most concepts are out there, I would say. So is there a way to dodge any sort of nostalgia when you're making an adventure game at this point?
It's going to be tricky, and based on the evidence that I have accrued in preparing for this episode would suggest to me that would be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Essentially what I realized is going through these things and trying to come up with a list of, here were the adventure games that I did play as a child versus the ones I only played for the first time as a late teen or older. That it turned out there were a lot fewer than I expected in my past. I did not grow up with as many as I thought, either that or I've forgotten all of them, which is horrifying. And so apparently a lot of these things that still strike the nostalgia chords in me are from general feel and thoughts about what the gaming era was like rather than actual gaming experiences I might have had.
Right. That's why I think it's so interesting that no matter where we take an adventure game, you're going to get a little sense of nostalgia no matter what, just for the genre.
I think so.
Just for the genre being what it is.
Although it's interesting because, like, I think the thing that really spurred our thoughts for this, there were two things that we wanted to like that made us think about like nostalgia and coming at games and from that point of view was both the fact that we live streamed as part of our sort of cavalcade of products. We played through every single Nancy Drew adventure game because we had never played any Nancy Drew stuff, nor had we ever read Nancy Drew as a character.
Oh, interesting.
Nancy Drew had no existence in our brains at all. It's very. I think that's much
like
more
none?
like within America. I think that's much
knew
more
the character's
within America.
name, but
I knew that the name Nancy Drew was some kind of
child detective, possibly.
like a detective.
Okay.
that was it. I'd never read any Nancy Drew content. I didn't know anything about the lore. I didn't know about the setting. I didn't know. I couldn't have told you.
We were not Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. We were Famous Five and Secret Seven.
Yeah, we all had Enid Blyton in Australia growing up. So it just really was not a thing that we had any cultural context for. And then the fact that there were video games, we had no context for those either. And so we started playing them from the beginning. We played through every single one. Well, not quite from the beginning. We sort of picked the good ones early on.
That was a mistake.
And played through them and really, really loved them. Like, we had a lot of fun with it, even without having any connection to the characters. Or, to be honest, like, for people who have played them, the style of those games is not really the same as a lot of other adventure games. Like, I grew up on text parser games and even like normal point and click adventures, which have a very different feel to the Nancy Drew games, which are almost just like, here is a series of like still images of places that you can, and you move through it, and there are literal just like puzzles to solve. It's just like, here, do a crossword,
Myst-like.
Nancy.
It's weird to compare that to Myst, but to me, it's very Myst-ish.
No, I understand fully. But again, the second game that we wanted to bring up is we never played Myst until we were
just
like
a couple of years ago.
Old, right? A couple of years ago, we played Myst for the first time. And so like it felt like this entire genre of Myst-likes, because I would say Nancy Drew has a similar feel. Yeah. But we had never played Myst either growing up. So we had no nostalgia for the gameplay either. Like, and we loved it. We played through all the Nancy Drews. They are ridiculous, but the characters are fun, and the puzzles are either fun or the worst thing you've ever done in your life.
Which feels appropriate.
And yeah,
I did a video on, since you've played all of them, you guys played Blackmore Manor then?
Oh, yeah.
We played that one twice.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, okay. Arguably one of the better entries.
I would say it's at the top of our list.
It's so difficult. I found it so hard.
Well, clearly, so we talk about this a lot when we talk about puzzle writing, is that clearly Nancy Drew, like, there are two levels for Nancy Drew. There's junior difficulty and there's senior difficulty in every single game. And they're clearly designed, maybe they're not. Maybe someone's going to come out from the Nancy Drew team and tell me I'm wrong. But they very much seem like they are designed initially at the junior level and then made harder for senior, rather than the other way around, which is to make them at a senior level and then made easier for junior, which often leads to the puzzles just being bad, right? Because it's really hard to or rather, it's very easy to make a puzzle more difficult. You just make it worse, right? The worse a puzzle is, the harder it is to solve. And so some of them there are some really, like, it is surprisingly high level puzzle solving in some of those Nancy Drew games, which is really odd. So yeah, like, Blackmore Manor is the puzzliest of the Nancy Drews. And it was the second one we played. But because we're coming at it from a puzzle perspective, we were writing puzzles, solving puzzles, we were doing, like, for us it was like,
that
oh my
was
god,
what
I love this.
for
Look
us.
at all these cool puzzles. But yeah, some of them are really tough.
I think it helps also that they are more logic-y puzzles. I find that a lot of times in the point and clicks, let's like, consider the LucasArts games like Grim Fandango, Sam & Max, Monkey Island. I think a lot of people are blinded by nostalgia in terms of difficulty level. I am too. Like, I once told somebody that Grim Fandango was pretty easy. And I'm like, no, that's not right. That's nostalgia talking, I think. Because if you were to put that in front of a brand new player, I think that they would struggle with some more of these moon puzzles. But at the same time, somebody told me that once that Sam & Max was a very easy game. And I had played that in early adulthood, so I have some nostalgia for it. But I'm like, this game is hard. I don't know if nostalgia is just blinding us to difficulty level, or if as kids, we were just sponges with imaginations that could aid us in these, like, very difficult adventure games,
Well, when you're a child, pretty much any game is a difficult puzzle game because children don't read and comprehend very well in general.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, I remember that with Pokemon, just getting stuck in original Pokemon because I didn't pay that much attention to what the characters were telling me.
Right, yeah, you just don't read what they say. And I had that problem in so many of the early LucasArts games. I did not see the clues because I just wasn't reading.
Yeah, but when you're a little kid, you don't question that. Everything about being alive is hard, so of course this game's going to be hard. And once you get the answer, it makes just as much sense as anything else. Now it's easy.
So I played all the LucasArts games as a kid. Like those are the ones I have nostalgia for because those are the ones that I was just so hooked on and drawn to. And I have that problem, right? Where to me I just breeze through them and I'm like, "Oh yeah, Sam and Max is super easy." Right? Because I've memorized all the puzzles.
Yeah.
But watching other people play them, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I guess there's no reason you would have thought to do this."
I mean, for me, it's even worse because my nostalgia goes to the Sierra games, and those are impossible.
Right.
It's so difficult to be like, yeah, I have such nostalgia for this game. You should play it, and then somebody having an enjoyable experience with, say, King's Quest III. It doesn't happen.
It's tough to try to pick
Yeah.
which old ones you go back and play because you know that some of them are going to be virtually unplayable. You hear all the terrible stories that if you do the wrong thing in the first minute, you'll play for 10 more hours and then just fail.
Yeah.
So it's
So
always a worry.
I played all of the Sierra games in I like played a little bit of them as a kid. But I really played through all of them in 2019, 2020.
Sure.
And I played through all of them. And I did not have that nostalgia for them. But there was still this level of charm. And I don't know if it's the nostalgia for just the way old computers were. Right? Like I can't tell. I can't really separate it.
Or again, just for the genre alone of these old point and clicks.
Yeah,
you
like
know?
even if you haven't played those games, it's like, oh, I remember this style of play.
Right.
I remember this. I obviously I could play any text passer game now,
Right.
and it would feel incredibly nostalgic. Even though really growing up, it was just Quest for Glory. It was just Heroes Quest.
Yeah.
The first Quest for Glory game that I played thousands and thousands of hours in as a child. But that generated so much nostalgia that as soon as I can hit spacebar and then type take rock, it will always be nostalgic, even if it's from games that I've never heard of or never played. You know, so it's an interesting, that's why it was interesting, playing Myst and other stuff was so different that I didn't have nostalgia for that style. So it was really interesting to play as an adult. But yeah, you're right. Even
nostalgia
stylistically,
towards Myst. Like, you ever just hate something so much and you're also nostalgic for it?
A lot of people seem to be that way with Myst. And
our thought was
this is fascinating.
As a puzzle game, Myst is great. Myst is a fantastic. We played through it with no nostalgia for it. Never seen. I didn't know anything about
guides,
Myst.
nothing. We didn't know what we were getting into.
We just played Myst, and I think as an adult, it's all the
it was
stuff
solid.
is there.
It held up good.
Everything is workoutable and solvable. But we played Riven afterwards, and people often really like Riven. And Riven, I will say, beautiful, literally beautiful to look at. Much more interesting from a world perspective. Much more interesting from a narrative perspective. Puzzle wise, the late game of Riven is bad.
It's really so hard.
It is.
You're talking,
but it's
the marbles puzzle.
Oh yeah, going back to all the weird little
the weird topography related things.
Yeah, and just when you go up and you change the levels of a map.
There's a lot of very finicky clicking,
and it's a lot of stuff where you go, this has been designed not just poorly, but irritatingly. It's
we just weren't happy.
It's
for a lot of our play.
You try something and it's well, you have to see what the ramifications are. But to see what the ramifications are of what you try, it's like a 2-minute clicking journey from one thing to another thing. You're like, I don't want to have to do this 8 times. So every time I get it wrong, I'm just getting irritated. The puzzle design in the latter third, in the final act of Riven is, in my opinion, terrible. But people remember it as bad.
I don't even think we posted that part of our stream of that because we were too angry and we felt too bad about ourselves.
Which is this game is the worst.
It just wasn't a good look.
It's interesting so I played Myst in 2019 over I started it on my mobile phone over on a flight to the Dominican Republic. Because I was like, I have 6-8 hours or something. I'm just gonna sit and for the first time since I was a little kid, I'm gonna try to play Myst. And when I was a little kid, I got nowhere. Right, I didn't even learn to rotate the tower. I had nothing. But then playing it again in 2019, I was like, this is awesome. I love this. I am like you're saying, it's so well designed. It is it's just like you're exploring a world where you don't know how anything works, and you have to figure out how everything works. And then that leads to puzzles, because like how then now that I've figured out how this works, how does this achieve any sort of goal? And then you move on to that next step. Then I finished it during that vacation. There was one day where the person I went on vacation with, she got sick, and we were stuck in the resort hotel room for a day, and I was like, so I was just playing Myst the entire day, and I beat it. And I beat it with no hints, and I was so fucking proud of myself. So then I went on to play Riven, and I'd never even touched Riven before. And I was still dedicated to this idea. Like, I'm going to beat this without any hints. I'm going to do it by sheer force of will.
But you're also powered by the fact that you can do that in Myst. Myst is completely solvable. It's so nicely contained.
And if I remember correctly, I might be wrong about this, because this was several years ago, but the entire latter half of Myst or Riven that you're talking about is all in service of this fire marble, or this marble puzzle.
I think,
even the topography stuff is to give you have to solve that to give you a clue about where you place the marbles on this one machine. And I remember I would just give it like one, I might be wrong, so you might remember it better than me. But I remember giving it like, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to solve anything. I'm going to go in, I'm going to play this for an hour, maybe 2 hours. I know I'm not going to solve this puzzle today. And it's like, so I think the idea of playing it, you guys said you played on a stream?
Yeah, we were live streaming Riven the whole time. I think,
sort of gives you like this pressure, right? Like you have to continuously make progress.
And like Rose's, like you were saying, there are people in the chat who remember playing Riven as a kid. So like, what are you talking about? This is so easy. You just obviously just turn the golden handle. You're like, there's not even a handle. Oh, yeah, you can't see it. But if you click on the wall in the right place, the handle appears. Obviously, it's clear.
Obviously.
How did you not figure this out?
Riven was incredibly hard. And again, like I said, like I would play it, saying to myself, I'm just not going to make progress today.
You know what? I'm noticing now that you are saying that, especially Matt, your like dedication to solving these puzzles, right? I do find that these more first-person logic-based puzzles, and when we say logic-based, we mean like puzzles like Sudoku or slider puzzles or math-based puzzles. Those would be considered logic puzzles. I find that you guys are neither hindered or enabled by nostalgia. You can kind of look at it objectively as a puzzle, as like a logic puzzle that you're wanting to solve. Whereas a lot of people, I think it's harder to do that with, say, the King's Quest or even the LucasArts, because even though you can't die in LucasArts, that doesn't mean they're easy games, you know?
Well, because the Sierra puzzles are horrible.
Yeah.
So again, I played all these in 2019 and 2020, and they're all just really bad. And so without nostalgia, like I still found them incredibly charming, because like we said, there might be a lot of nostalgia at work there.
But it was more difficult for you to play than something let's say all the Myst games, because you were like passionate about solving these puzzles.
Right. The way I went through all the Sierra games is I would have a walkthrough and I would play by myself without using the walkthrough up to a point. And when I felt like I got to a new, I don't know, like a new area, a new chapter, a new phase of the game, I would pull up the walkthrough and be like, okay, what the fuck did I miss? Because I don't want to go. I don't want to jump back 5 hours, right? Well, not that any Sierra game takes 5 hours, but like 5 hours of my lifetime of like
of playtime,
playtime moving around just trying to solve shit. So I would then pull up the walkthrough and then go back. I would not have had the patience to go through them like some people describe as they did as kids, which is I would get to the end, or I'd get to some point, I'd be like, oh, I can't progress. I should restart the whole game because I don't know what I missed. That is not something I have nostalgia for, because I played the LucasArts games. That is something that I find infuriating. I find stupid. Like, there's no part of me that's like, that I don't find that cute or clever or funny or cool. I just think that is horrible.
I agree.
There is some part
Yeah.
of me, and this is on point for our topic, there is some part of me that likes it, and I think it's nostalgia based. Because again, I grew up on Sierra, so I just thought when growing up that all games were like this, that you can mess up, and if you mess up, you've got to like go back and start again, and that's just the way that
There's
games
no
are
social
made.
bonding, like bonding over a game bullying you.
But
Yeah.
honestly, that's a thing
Right.
that I think is great in those old games. Like one of the things I sort of missed, and going back to look at old games, I think one of the things that has changed a lot, and it's nice in modern adventure games, you still get this, but in gaming in general, like in the 90s, games were made, and you'd look at the credits and it'd be like, writer, this one person. And you're like,
Yes.
all right.
Right.
So when, and because of that, when you play games, like there is something fun almost about a connection to the game writer itself, where he's going, hi, I'm John, and yeah, you got that wrong, idiot. Nice one, dummy. And it's like,
I
you're
do miss the
talking-
text parsers that had obstinate narrators talking
Yeah.
back at you.
Yeah, every time you died, they'd be like, well, that was a silly decision, wasn't it? You'd be like,
It's
oh,
like reading a
you."
Goosebumps, give yourself goosebumps, and you make a choice that he thinks is a bad choice.
Nice.
And R.L. Stein just comes in
Yeah,
and
he's
starts
like, "Why did you
crapping
do
all
that,
over you.
dumb child?" But
Right,
it's-
right.
But there's an element that I really like about those old games that it feels like there's a bit more of like, why doesn't this make sense? Because they didn't test it with people. One guy wrote it all out, and he said, "Here's
Yeah.
my game," and
It
you
made
just
sense
play
to
it.
that guy.
Like,
I mean, probably.
and he's having fun. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
there's something that is nostalgic, even just about that. So like, I sometimes get that by playing new games from single creators. There's a sense of nostalgia to me for that, for when that was normal, for when like
Yeah.
games were one, like when something went wrong, it wasn't because, oh, look at this studio, they've screwed up their game. It's like, oh, I guess he didn't think about that. I guess the 3 people who designed this
Wow.
entire game from scratch, they weren't really thinking. It's much more human, you know?
Yeah.
I was like,
Um,
this is a big difference that I've sort of noticed between the way we do Escape This podcast and doing Rise of the Golden Idol is playtesting to make sure that things
Yeah.
work on a grand scale
Mm.
and will work for multiple people and not just ourselves.
And
Oh my
for
God,
people who
that's-
will never engage with us, it's like everyone who plays an Escape This podcast engages with us directly.
Yeah.
You get to just play it, you know?
I'll say that about that's something that Jack Allen, my editor at Adventure Game Hotspot, talks about a lot. Is like adventure games need a lot of playtesting,
Mhm.
and
Mm.
most of the time that an adventure game fails, it is because of a lack of playtesting, and
Yeah.
is a lack of, or you do playtesting, but you don't watch people play your game and see who figures out what, how, and where. And who
Yeah.
stalls what, how, and where.
Yeah, for
I have
sure.
a question.
Mhm.
I have a fun question.
Oh, good, because I wasn't going to answer otherwise.
Thanks for
would-
apologizing for your fun question.
That's a
because
real
that-
boring question. No, I have a question. Is there, for all of us, this is for all of us, is there a game a very specific game that you love? You absolutely love it. Maybe because of nostalgia, but maybe not. But we'll see in our answers, that nobody else understands. Like legitimately, they don't understand your love of this game.
Do you have one while we
My
all
taste
think?
is perfect, but
While we all think, do you have one in mind?
I do.
Okay.
I do, and it's yeah, it's highly hated by everyone. It's King's Quest VII. And I'm going to fully admit that it's purely nostalgia based for me. Purely. Like,
Mm.
it's not that great of a game. Although I think the quality of it is not bad. I will say that as an artist, I find it very beautiful looking. It was a departure from the other King's Quest games. I would say it was even easier on the puzzles, but it kind of lost some of that charm. So not many people like it, but for me, it was I saw it in an Omni, which if you're from the Midwest, if you're from Chicago, high five. That was a like grocery store in the Midwest. And they for some reason they sold games. I don't know why, but they had like a little electronic section, and I saw King's Quest VII, and I was enamored with the 2D. I had never seen a 2D game like that. I hadn't seen Curse of Monkey Island yet, so this was something special to me. And it was the first game I saved up and played and bought with my own money. So there's definitely a great nostalgia for that game. And also, again, finding it special because of that 2D element that I had never seen before.
That game reminds me of one of the early massively multiplayer online role-playing games that I played as a kid, which I have a ton of nostalgia for, and I still go back. Even it's a bad game, and this isn't my answer, but because it's not an adventure game,
Okay.
but it's a bad game. It's called The Realm Online, and it was
I know The Realm.
Yeah, it was made by Sierra in that era, and
Yeah.
it's almost the art style is almost identical to
Ooh.
King's Quest VII, but it's like a role play, a massively multiplayer role playing game. Like and it's so numbers based and so boring, but I absolutely love it. It keeps changing developers because people don't want to let it die, but it makes no money.
No.
Fair enough.
Now that's nostalgia right there, when something's making zero money, but you just cannot let it go.
I still go back, I still find it and download it and play it for
That's
a few
so funny.
weeks every couple months, or maybe once a year. Okay, do you guys have answers to this?
I mean, I have, from not quite an adventure game point of view, but close. Like, one of my ones that I love, but is full nostalgia, because if someone's like, is it like written well? I'll be like, no, it's written terribly. But I will always defend the combat. I love Quest 64, which in Australia was called Holy Magic Century. Was the title
Quest
in
64, man. That brings back memories.
Really, all the cool kids call it Holy Magic Century, the real title for us.
I didn't even know that.
And I played so much of that as a kid. And I still think the combat system in that, like the magic system, combat system, was very unique and is really interesting to play. This idea of like you can like physically like run away from certain attacks, and you start to memorize. Like, I remember as a kid figuring out this, like, oh, when they shoot like 3 beams of air at you, if you take 1 half step forward, you dodge them all. Or when they shoot this thing, if you run in a circle, it'll miss you. Or like these guys, you've got to get close enough that they're firing over your head. Like, there's some really cool stuff, I think.
It's like that Luigi
system.
Always wins Mario Party thing.
Yeah, sometimes you don't do it. But it's also like, yeah, like it's ugly and it's dumb and the story doesn't make any sense. And even though I have so much nostalgia and I've played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of that game, I've never gotten past like the second boss. So that's not a good sign. But I love that game. I will never not enjoy playing Quest 64.
I think that's a great answer. And I kind of do consider that a hybrid of an adventure game. In fact, I bought it for the N64 simply because it had the word quest in it. And obviously, yeah, as a Sierra person, quest equals adventure game.
Adventure, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I liked the atmosphere of that game.
It's a cool game. Everyone play Holy Magic Century. I think I also have like an anti-answer to this question, which is Quest for Glory, which is like the Hero's Quest. Which I think I played so much as a kid, and I have so much nostalgia for it. And then I think I went through a period of thinking like, I just have nostalgia for the game, but it's a bit silly. And now I go back and I look at it from a game design lens, and I think, you know what? I think that's maybe the best adventure. I think that's one of the greatest games ever made. I think it's actually legitimately phenomenal. I think the design of it is fantastic. Like, what games were you playing back then where you could import your character from one game to the next to save all the stats that you'd built up through gameplay? Like, it had a leveling up mechanic that made sense, that nowadays people are like, wouldn't it be great if more games had mechanics like this? Like, it's the same level up system that then got taken for like Elder Scrolls games later, of like use a skill enough and then every time you use it the chance goes up. And like, I think, and the storyline, like when I went back, I played it as an adult, and it's like the story makes sense, the characters make sense, they're interesting people, you can figure out what's going on based on the implications of conversations you hear and solve the whole thing. I think going back to that, it's like I'm having to take off my nostalgia glasses to appreciate how good that game is. It's like, no, it's not just nostalgia. That's a tightly designed game, and is one of the many things I put on my list of why 1989 may have been the best year for video games.
Wow.
I agree with that, because again, I played these much later, and it's funny. So I've met Laurie and Corey Cole a couple times now, and well, they never remember me, but they always ask, because I tell them when I meet them, like, oh, I played your games when I was a bit older, early 30s, as my first time, so I didn't really have nostalgia for them, and they're like, oh, what is the, like, they are very interested, like, what is the experience of playing those games now? Like, how do they hold up? What do they feel like? And I'm like, great, they feel great. Like, they're legitimately just really good.
Really good.
The idea of sometimes like having to climb a tree 70 times to level up your like there maybe should have been a few more ways to practice those skills.
But also, like, I was thinking about that yesterday. It's like, it also sometimes, as a kid especially, but also as like, it creates a sense of like earned existence within that world. Like, why is my character good at throwing knives? Well, because I went to that part of the forest where there's a board set up where I could practice knife throwing, and I sat there for a long time going, throw knife, enter, throw knife, enter, throw knife, enter, get knives, enter, throw knife, enter, and I earned my knife throwing because I was practicing in world. And nowadays, I think it's tedious.
Yeah,
but
I'm a grinding gamer.
Yeah,
I'm into that.
I think that's just sort of like
I
games
like
have
the grind.
decided to stop being tedious, but it's like the tedium, even like from an artistic perspective, has a justification in universe. Like, it should be tedious. You're doing something tedious to get better at it. Nowadays, games are like, no, you shouldn't ever feel tedium. But I think if you accept it as a thing you're allowed to feel in video games, I think it's an incredibly good, like, implementation of it. Why am I good at climbing trees? I didn't get the spell fetch, and I needed to get the ring out of the bird's nest, and the only way was to climb the tree. And when I was finally rewarded with climbing the tree, I fell off the branch because my character was too tired. How dare you? I love it.
Dani, do you have an answer to this question?
I am really struggling with this one.
Well, why don't you talk about Granny's Garden?
What's wrong with Granny's Garden? I challenge you.
Oh boy. Uh-oh.
I don't know what this is.
My primary school, this was the game that was inbuilt on all of the computers, along with the point-and-click Edumate sort of ones. Granny's Garden, a very prototype text parser. It was sold that when we looked up what consoles it was on, it said originally Commodore 64 and something else that I'd never heard of.
Oh, yeah, I could not even tell you what it was. Like the Britcom. That is like some insane thing I've never heard of.
And it's very standard. The story is, oh no, the 6 royal children have been kidnapped by a witch around the world. Let's go to the various locations and quote-unquote solve puzzles to rescue them. And we downloaded it a few days ago so that Billy could experience it, so that he could have the nostalgia-free experience with one of these things to see how it went. Now, the thing is, I didn't really have any nostalgia for, oh, what an amazing game in that way. I'm not going to defend it, except for one puzzle. I remembered about 2 things from this game. Generally, the puzzles are barely puzzles, and it still has the very standard things of, oh, you make one wrong decision, turns out the witch kills you, haha. Start all over again. But the one thing that was a puzzle, which involves like, needing to deduce what foods certain dragons like when you have a limited number of foods to give them before the witch gets you, and you just have to figure out the appropriate order to feed these dragons in order to accomplish your goal. I've got a little grid drawn up in my notebook that we use to figure it out.
Fun to solve.
And as soon as a grid gets involved, I feel like you've got a good puzzle.
That's interesting. So I think my answer to this is Mean Streets, the first Tex Murphy game.
Okay.
There's a lot bad about that game. Like, there is a flight simulator in it that's horrible. There is a side-scrolling gun combat in that game that is terrible. But the mystery in that game is really, really well done. And it is the sort of mystery where you have to take paper notes. Which is rare in that era. And like, you would talk to somebody and using, if I remember correctly, I think there's a text parser, but you would talk to people and you would have to remember who to ask about and who to ask. Like, you'd have to like remember specific like characters and topics so that you could grill people about them. And to me, that's just really fun, player-dependent mystery solving that you wouldn't see again in games. Well, besides maybe like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you'd like barely see that again in games for 20-some years.
Yeah, I think the concept of, but also I think the concept of like, hey, grab a notebook and keep your own notes has gone the way of tedium in video games. Like, no one, we're not allowed that anymore. No one's allowed. You can't expect a player to keep notes outside.
Which is
the game.
outrageous, because that's what we did with every Nancy Drew and Myst and everything, and that made it great for us.
I loved it.
But I think it's there's a difference between like I don't think anybody minded taking notes for like Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, to use a modern example. But it would be anathema to take notes on, say, a point-and-click game or a casual game or a non-adventure, like a non-puzzle game. But I think there's a certain type of puzzle that people still don't mind taking notes on. And I just think that puzzle has to be designed in a way that it feels good to do it. There's a little bit of like a throwing the baby out with a bathwater sort of scenario with that stuff.
Oh, I've got an interesting example of a game that I think will fit this sort of category, but standard might be a controversial one to say.
Ooh.
Pokemon Generation 2.
Oh, a lot of nostalgia, but really it's not that good.
Look, I love it. I loved everything about it when it came out. I still love it today, but at the very least, I can't remember who it was. There's a YouTube video out there where someone just goes through point by point and says why Gen 2 is bad. And I watched it, ready for some hate watching. And I went, no, this is amazing. I agree with all of this. Doesn't affect me in any way, but you're right, man.
Yeah, it's a bad game.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I played a lot of Gen 1. And then I got into Pokemon again, like kind of later. I loved the newer games. Like I loved like the DS games and the 3DS games, and 2 was rough.
It's interesting, like, because that came out at peak nostalgia hitting time. What, we were 10 or something when that happened?
Yeah, something like
that. That was the absolute right time for a shiny new sequel to come out. It just, everything felt huge, everything felt exciting, and yet
it had that thing where you get to the end of the game and you're like, okay, beat the game. And then all of a sudden you get to go back to the first game.
Couldn't have been a better idea for them to do. Were there things that they should have improved about that experience? For example, making these Kanto gym leaders a little bit higher level, because you've already beaten an Elite Four. Why am I fighting level 40 people again? They could have worked a little harder.
Right.
I'm so much better than all of you now.
A little bit. But anything that they changed about the original world, that was exciting. That was amazing.
I had another, we were thinking before we came on the show, like trying to think about like, oh, what do we want to talk about? What do we have like nostalgia things for? And what are sources of nostalgia that we didn't experience, that we experienced late? And one of the ones we wanted to bring up as a thing to talk about.
I think we may have mentioned this to you possibly off recording when you came on our show.
Was that we played through Seventh Guest for the first time.
Ugh.
Oh my god.
Well,
but we started with the remake on the Oculus. We started with the VR remake of Seventh Guest.
Got it.
And that's good.
That's a good
game.
It was re-FMV'd with new actors doing all of the parts. They changed the story a tiny bit, and all of the puzzles needed to be redesigned for VR.
They didn't just change the story a tiny bit. They also doled it out slowly throughout the game, rather than it being an unskippable 10-minute cutscene at the start of the game, which was so much better implemented.
Okay, yeah, that is a lot better.
Like, the VR game is great.
It was so much fun. It was a wonderful experience. It was beautiful.
And so then we finished the VR game, which is a really, really, if people nowadays want to play like a Seventh Guest experience, play the VR game. It's an actual good game. So then we went and we played the original version. We streamed that as well. We played that. And it's just like, we weirdly almost had like nostalgia for the remake that just came. Like, we were working on the good memories of what we had just played to play the original and be like, oh, well, I could skip this being terrible because I've seen it be good already. Like,
right.
I don't like. Obviously, this story is nonsense, but I've seen it improved on, and so yeah, it feels cool. I get it. Hey, it's that guy I just met, a month ago. Here he is in the old version.
And the puzzles that were just tedious, like the big maze, which I have an entire page of notebook trying to draw out that maze. Not in the VR version. You do not have to do that.
Yeah, like all that stuff taken out. The old game had like 18 different chess puzzles, and they're all tedious and they're all impossible. And we just grinded our way through them. The maze was great because there's a solution to the maze that you can find in another room. We didn't do that. We just solved the maze, which meant we had like 2 hours of us running into dead ends and having a voice go,
feeling lonely.
And then coming back to the start. We literally had that because we just went, let's go left every time until we've solved the maze and did the entire thing. It took us a very long time of feeling lonely. Yeah. But it's not like it is. There's also parts that in the modern day are unplayable. Like I think we talked about this. I don't know if it made the episode that when you guys were on our show, but like there's a puzzle now that was reliant on the fact that your computer had a slow processor.
So and we've talked about this on this show. Yeah,
it's called attacks with an X.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah. But so you nowadays, are playing the game against the computer's AI, and it's just if you've got a slow processor,
you can win because it doesn't make decisions very far ahead.
But it turns out that if you play it in 2023,
it's literally will always make the winning decision. There's no way unless you have your own AI running separately.
Exactly. That is how I beat it. That is how I beat it. I got. I found an AI online, and you just fill in their moves.
That person is a miracle of the internet. That's why the internet exists. For that person who made that tool.
If you do that, there's like a 50-50 shot that you win, right? Because now both of you are making the perfect decision. And it's like, as a human, you cannot, you cannot beat the game. So there was plenty of stuff like, and like, but it was so weird to be like to look at the nostalgic version and be like, oh, this is dumb. There's so many problems with this. But to be carrying the goodwill that we got from playing a new version, it was a really odd experience of like anti-nostalgia. But it was very interesting to play. And we want to play the sequel. We'll play the 11th hour or whatever it was.
No, don't do that.
Well, okay. I had this experience sort of without playing a good version with the 11th hour. The 11th hour is so bad. And I know a lot of people love it. And I guarantee the only reason you would like that game is nostalgia. It is so bad. The puzzles are worse than in Seventh Guest. And the narrative, you mentioned having to sit through an incredibly long cutscene at the beginning of Seventh Guest. Mm-hmm. In 11th Hour, you have to sit through an incredibly long cutscene, and then your reward for solving any puzzle is you get to watch another clip from that exact same cutscene. You watch a movie, and then you rewatch bits of that movie.
Dumb.
It is horrible. And they double down on the obnoxious guy mocking you every time you get something wrong.
Feeling stupid.
Yeah, Stauf. What's his first name?
I don't know if he has one.
Don't remember.
It's just the puppet man Stauf.
It's
Stauf.
This is going to sound like hyperbole for this episode, but I have said this before, and I'm on the record. The 11th Guest is the worst game I've ever played in my life.
Awesome.
Wow.
So what you're saying is we should play it, but on stream. We just can't play it at home.
Oh no, I desperately don't want to stream it. I don't want to get that rage out into the universe again.
It is one of the only games that not only did I not finish, I said I am not going to finish. I'm not going to put myself through this.
You called the creators. You said, you owe me money. You have to give me money for playing your game.
I feel like I remember there was like a fan-made sequel or something, like a semi-unofficial thing.
Something, the 13th
something with dolls.
Doll.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Doll, yeah. Which would be interesting
to see what that does.
Yeah. Agreed.
But no, look, for people follow along at home, if you do want to play Seventh Guest, there is a good version out there, and it is the VR version. That is well worth a play.
I don't think I really had any nostalgia for FMV whatsoever. I think that largely skipped me by.
FMV was not part of my childhood outside of the cutscenes of Kessen 2.
What is this game?
Do you not play Kessen? Kessen was a military strategy version of Dynasty Warriors.
Wow.
So Dynasty Warriors, you're just playing as Lu Bu on the battlefield. But in Kessen, you controlled entire units and swapped between them and did the battles that way. It was great. It was lovely. Romance of the Three Kingdoms, tactical stuff. Kessen 2 is really good. Kessen 3 is bad. Don't play it. But it had a little bit of FMV in its cutscenes. But outside of that, I really don't think I had an exposure to FMV as a child at all. And I think
That's so funny. It's such a huge part of my huge.
Yeah, and
like live, and I'm talking about live acted FMV,
yes.
not like
like real proper
live acted games. I really early on, Clue had become one of my favorite things, and I call it things because I love the movie, I love the game,
Nice.
I love just everything Clue related, right? And at some point in like the mid 90s, I want to say, they came out with a Clue FMV game.
Nice.
Hasbro did. It was licensed, so it was official. And I could never get it running very well, but I thought that live acted games were like the future. I'm a kid, by the way. But so just imagine Small Roses being like, this is the future, live acted video games. And I'd never experienced anything like it. I thought it was so cool. And I was very disappointed that most FMV live acted games were pretty trash.
Right. Well, I was going to say, we have no nostalgia for these. I am fully on board with making it the future of video games.
Would love
because
that.
I think honestly, one of our first real FMV experiences was playing Contradiction.
Yeah, that game's great.
And that is fantastic. I loved it so much.
Yeah.
I fell in love with the detective. I loved his, just like every time you pick something, he was like, and what do you think about this? And he's suddenly holding the object. And you're like, this is so, he's one of my favorite fictional detectives now. I loved Contradiction so much.
But modern FMV is so good. Like, if you've played any of the DeVecchi studio games, like Murderous Muses,
Telling Lies,
or Telling Lies. Is Telling Lies one? No, I think that might be the other one that does
the other. It's in the same. It's like in the same.
I think that's
vein,
a Sam Barlow game, but
it is. Yep, you're right.
But they did the Dark Knights with Poe and Monroe, which I don't love. But Shape-Shifting Detective: The Infectious Madness of Dr. Decker.
Yeah, Dr. Decker.
They are. It's just they've just found some developers have just found this way to use FMV to tell stories in like these really interesting ways, rather than just like, oh, it's the same as any other point and click game. There's just actors, which is like the FMV of the 90s and early 2000s. It is like, okay, if we're going to use FMV, we have to change the entire structure of the game. So you are a first person, you're a therapist interviewing patients and trying to unravel a mystery while you do so, or situations like that where it's like there's a reason it's FMV rather than just a fun way to. And I think early on it probably was just like graphically what you couldn't computer generate anything that looked like a real person, but you could now have enough memory on your computer to put in a image, like recorded things of a real person.
I'm just looking at a YouTube video of an old game that I played, Science Sleuths Volume 1, which is an old one. And I'm looking at it, and it is clearly one of those games. The window that it is in looks like it's an Adobe style window. It doesn't look like its own proper game window.
Sure.
But it had in the game, because you were playing a detective, sometimes you would interview people, and it's just a video. Like, take a look at this. Just quickly press play to get a style of it.
That is just like 90s TV newsreel, kind of just a person in the corner talking on a balcony. That's just a woman.
But do you see the game window as well?
Yeah, the game window is fantastic.
It's got like a save and an eyedropper
it looks like
icon and things.
It looks like the whole thing's open in Paint.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But yeah, like, I don't know, it was really lovely. And so yeah, like playing and seeing all the FMV in like Seventh Guest as an adult, I weirdly, again, I felt nostalgia for Contradiction, a game that came out like 20 years later. And it's just funny that you can build these things up. I say this a lot. Like, I really don't care when people talk about like things being dated, right? People are like, oh, the controls are so dated now and this, that, and the other. And it's like, oh, it's hard to play. I never get that. Like, to me, every single thing that I experience is new the moment I experience it, right? Like music from 1972 is not old because I didn't hear it in 1972. It's new because I heard it today. And so games are the same. Like I'll build up nostalgia. Like I built nostalgia for a game from 1990 based on a game from 2016 because of course I did. I played the 2016 one first. Like that's where I start to build that bank of nostalgia. And then everything new that is similar, it's like, yeah, it all feeds back into that.
It does start to become an interesting line. Where is the dividing line between nostalgia and I miss that because that was better? Just because it's
sometimes
good.
things are good.
And just
Right.
fond thoughts. Like,
Yeah, like-
where is nostalgia?
I'll tell you what the line is. It's when you enjoy listening to the sound effects from from DOS games that are just like, it's like that. I love every single DOS sound effect is amazing. Objectively, they're terrible. No one jumps on a box and hears. But
now
that's
it's like we only know
sound.
that it's nostalgia if it's objectively bad.
Yeah. It's nostalgia if I had to write down what sound does a box make, that's not the sound a box makes. That's bad. Crossed out. I was just talking to someone the other day about like the memory of first getting speakers for a computer and up until then using all of the sounds that came generated out of the tower itself. So playing, and I was like, man, I remember that transition. Separate speakers. It isn't just a tiny chip in the middle of your full computer tower that just goes like that's what music is.
I remember getting Sound Blaster and I was just amazed. I was playing all these talkie games because I grew up on these Tandy DOS games where it's really only the PC speaker and it is shrill and not fun. Like just go anyone who's watching, just go watch the intro video to like King's Quest III, just the intro to the game. It's all PC speaker and it is tough to get through. So just getting separate speakers and Sound Blaster and hearing people talk, it was amazing.
Yeah. Well, we have do you guys have, does anybody else have, if we're going to get to our final insane segment, we are going to have to wrap this up. Does anyone else have any final thoughts on nostalgia and the way it colors positively or negatively your view of games?
I don't know. I have a fun tidbit that is vaguely related to nostalgia. If you've played the demo for Rise of the Golden Idol, you'll have seen the new implementation of how puzzle solving works in that game. That it has little windows, draggable puzzle windows.
Yes.
Rather than a separate whole sheet of puzzles. And I am sure that lots of people on the writing team will say, "Oh yeah, that was my idea or my idea." But I remember early on we were thinking of different ways to implement puzzles and how to solve issues of like people want to be able to look at the game and look at puzzles at the same time, and they can't really do that in the original game. And early on, my pitch, I was like, well, why don't we do them like little draggable windows? Like if you have it so it's there, and if it covers anything, that's fine. You just drag it somewhere else. You can see various things, and it's a separate window that drags around, which is sort of how it's been implemented in the end. So I in my head, even though I'm sure in someone else's head it was their idea, in my head it was my idea, just because I remember saying it. And I will say that I think when I examine that decision, the entire inspiration for that is the save menu for Morrowind. Not the save, like the pause menu of Morrowind. If anyone's played Morrowind, it had this weirdly unique thing where when you pause the game to see, to look at your inventory, it didn't have an inventory page. It had a tiny box in the corner that you could drag out and move to different places. That was your inventory. Another one was your stats and the map. And there were all these little draggable boxes you could move around. And I think that is at least where I got the idea to pitch, why don't we have little draggable puzzle windows?
Nice.
Now, it may not have actually been my idea. It's early. It was a group decision. But in my head, that's what I was picturing the whole time. So there's the nostalgia of Morrowind popping in.
That's funny because
Rise of the Golden Idol.
It made me think of like Deja Vu and ICOM. Yeah, ICOM simulations, right? Like that. Was that
okay.
Yeah. Let me just make sure I'm not saying something.
Yeah, Deja Vu ICOM is a thing.
Yeah, Deja Vu ICOM. Yeah, I was thinking of like the ICOM games, like Deja Vu, where it was just a bunch of menus that you would drag around your inventory and your like that's what sprung to mind when I played the Rise of the
And
Golden Knights.
for all we know,
Perfect.
that was what was in the mind of the people who actually implemented and suggested that weren't me.
Again, I am now watching a YouTube video of this and going, oh, have I played this before? I'm sure I haven't. And yet it's hitting that anyway.
It's giving you deja vu.
Ridiculously
I was
so.
entertaining Danny last night with videos of the 1996 game Normality, which I suddenly went, I think that's a terrible game, but I played so much of that as a kid. That's a great adventure
You're
game.
correct. That is a terrible game.
Oh yeah, I think it's probably the worst game
Can't
ever.
even play it.
I haven't played it since the 90s, but I loved it as a kid. But God, we were watching the opening cutscene and I was like, I said to Danny, I was like, I'm pretty sure he's one of these guys who's like classic, like terrible 90s, like counterculture, but in just by being gross kind of a guy. And then we started watching the cutscene. He was like, welcome to my game. This is the story of how I did all this. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I pinned it straight away. This guy's wearing gumboots and shorts for no reason. Everyone go play Normality. It's a great game.
That's the takeaway. That's the takeaway from this whole discussion. Go play Normality. Well,
all right.
Bill and Danny, thank you guys so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yes. My apologies for talking way too much.
Oh, no. That's what we love. You guys are kindred spirits in that way with us. So is there anything you guys want to promote before we get out of here?
I think you've probably heard it all by now.
Yeah, as a quick little summary, if you like fun audio adventure-y, escape roomy puzzles, check out Escape This Podcast. You can start with the episode that Matt and Roses were on. If you like murder mysteries, check out Solve This Murder. And if you want to get a fun, cool new game, go and get the demo for Rise of the Golden Idol and wishlist it and buy it as soon as it comes out. It's really fun. We're really proud of the game. And we did some work on it. And everyone else who worked on it made amazing things as well. And it's just come out really well. So definitely go and check it out.
I cannot wait for that game. Rose, is there anything you want to promote this week?
Well, I got my video out on Strange Horticulture. So if you guys want to listen to me gush desperately about finding another game like Strange Horticulture, I did do a video on that. So you guys should go check that out. Just Pushing Up Roses on YouTube. You know where to go.
Awesome. So we're part of the Adventure Game Hotspot Network. Check them out at adventuregamehotspot.com. There's all sorts of cool stuff there, and there's a bunch of other people on the network that you would love their content if you love ours. And Bill and Danny, sorry, we're not going to get to that segment, but we will.
Fine.
Maybe we should have you guys on again sometime, because
always have to. Literally, anytime you want us back for anything, just let us know.
That was a lot of fun. It was really fun talking to you guys.
So love chatting with you guys.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and major congratulations on being able to write for an adventure game. That's just the coolest thing in the world to me. And
it's been great.
It really is, and it's just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it's a really cool experience to have had.
Until the game comes out and everyone hates it, and then it's the worst experience we've ever had retroactively.
I didn't write that part.
Don't worry, I'll do a video on it.
And everybody else, we will be back next week. I think we're going to be talking about some of the game recommendations you sent us. So if you guys want to be ahead of us and if you guys want to play these games before we talk about them, that's basically what I'm trying to say. I was trying to think of a fancy way to say that, but there's no reason for that. I think Roses is going to be playing Voodoo Detective and There's No Game Wrong Dimension. And I'm going to finally be playing Life is Strange and the game The Journey Down. So
nice.
If you guys want to get ready for that, that'll be next week. And then that leaves only one thing left to say, huh?
Always get enough roughage in your diet?
I think, that's what we end every podcast with. Always get enough roughage in your diet, everybody.
And people still aren't getting enough roughage. Listen!
How many podcasts do we have to make for you guys to get your roughage?
That's the only point. The only sponsor of this show is roughage as a concept. And you're still not getting it.
Oh, podcasters are artists suffer.